Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I am your host, Kathy Groover.
And I'm Jason Mefford. And today we're going to talk about a little word that some of you might be experiencing at certain times in your life. It's called stress. I don't know. Kathy, have you ever experienced stress before? Never?
Yeah. No,
Oh.
No, never. No.
Okay.
No, everything is in perfect balance. I mean, I'm not type A at all. Not prone to taking on too much. Not prone to. No stress at all.
No stress at all. Well, I actually do have stress sometimes in my life because I'm a lot of those same things that you're talking about. And, as I talk to a lot of people feel kind of stressed out. Right. And, so let's go through and talk a little bit about stress, because I think there's sometimes some things that people maybe misunderstand about it. And maybe we can give people at least one tip today, to be able to help them kind of de-stress and actually enjoy and live life. Right. Instead of just feeling stressed and feeling tired, because I talk to a lot of people, especially men, because I'm a man, right? And it's a lot of people feel so stressed. They fight in traffic to go to work. They're at work and they're dealing with a bunch of stressful stuff at work. They fight traffic to come home, and they get home and they're done, right? They've just shut off. And so then, of course, their partner or their kids come up and say, hey, what's going on? And they're like, I'm done. I'm just done. Right. And so how we can help people relieve some of the stress so that it doesn't end up feeding over into their relationships, or affecting them negatively at work, because I know, I think you've done some research on some of the negative things that happen when we are stressed as well. So maybe you can kind of kick off a little bit and get us going to help reduce some stress in people's life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is my topic, so I could go on for 4 hours actually, which we don't have time for today. So we'll just do a little bit of it. The first thing that I love to do is to define stress, because we've all felt it, but we often don't really know what it is. And stress is a threat, real or imagined. It's a perception that demands are going to exceed our resources. So it's that feeling of, oh my gosh, this thing is too big for me to handle. And what I like about that definition is it's a perception, which has to do with those thought forms, or it's an imagined threat. And, if you're walking down a dark street and someone jumps out at you, yeah, that's a real threat. And you're going to mount this fight or flight response for that. But if on Friday afternoon your boss says to you, I want to see you first thing Monday morning, well, one, probably there goes your weekend. And two, is that really fight or flight worthy? Is this that kind of threat that you need to mount this major chemical and biological response to? Well, no. But unfortunately, that's what we do. So we have all this cascade of hormones, that fight or flight response we learned about in like 9th grade biology, where our heart races and our breathing gets a little uneven and the blood flow changes, and we have all these hormones and chemicals, which is great if you're an animal or if you're being chased by a bear, because when that danger passes, you rest, you go to sleep, and those hormones return to normal. And the problem now with us, our human stress, it's so much in our heads and it's happening all around us. And it's not this one stressor and done. It's this cascade of stressors, and it's either this high grade or low grade stress, and we don't have that chance to rest. Well, we don't have that chance for those hormones to stop, and it's driving us crazy.
Well, because I think that's interesting, because like you talked about, I mean, it's normally if you're running away from a bear, right, it's a short time period, and then like you said, we get to rest. One stressor, we freak out, adrenaline goes rushing, and all the other hormones take over, and then our body can relax because that threat is no longer there. And I think, like you said, in today's society, we kind of go from stress to stress to stress, these different threats or things that we perceive
Mhm.
as threats throughout our day. And so I think it's no wonder that, we get home at the end of the day and it's like, I'm done, finito, kaput, right? It's because we feel like we've ran away from 20 bears during the day,
Mhm.
because we're not kind of thinking about, and I love what you said, it's where we think our demand exceeds the resources, because I do a lot with companies in managing their risk, which again is threat responses and other stuff. But
Mhm.
um, I think that's a great way of thinking about it, that we feel like we're not going to be able to deal with this because we don't have the resources
Mhm.
it takes, right, to deal with it, which again is kind of unlocking the potential as well, because there's a lot more potential within inside of us than what we believe, right? I mean, there's stories about people lifting a 2,000-pound car off of a child, right? Or of people running ultra marathons or doing some other just really crazy things with their body, and not realizing, I mean, science would say you would die if you did that, but somehow the human
Mhm.
body actually did it. And
Yeah.
so yeah, what are some of these things that people can do to try to unlock some of that, and maybe deal with stress in the right way instead of thinking everything is a bear?
Right.
How do we kind of match between the two, and kind of respond to those stressors?
Sure. Well, and I think the first thing to recognize is that stress isn't the problem, because we can't control any of that stress. We can't control the traffic. We can't control the boss. We can't control the long line of TSA. We can't, all of that stuff is out of our control. So as soon as we stop trying to manage, well, we have to manage things, but stop trying to change and control things that can't be changed and controlled, we're going to be better off. The only thing we have control over are our thoughts and our responses to these things. And so often when it comes to stress, we have a reaction. Um, we have a knee-jerk reaction. You're overreacting. Well, we don't want to be reacting. We want to be responding. We want first responders. Nobody has ever accused us of over-responding. It's like, it's that reaction. And the responding, that takes a pause. We'll get to the pause in a second, but it's this, it's this perception, and we can focus on whatever we want to focus on. I mean, you're looking at me right now. You can focus on me. You can focus on the frame. You can focus on the plant, the Buddha. I mean, there's all these things in our view that we have the ability to choose what we focus on. And so often we're choosing to focus on the negative thing, which we're sort of primed for because it's a protection mechanism. But we also let our thoughts go crazy with those perceptions.
Mhm.
And we start to build up stories around these perceptions, so that when the boss says, I want to see you first thing Monday morning, all weekend long you're thinking, oh, what if he fires me? I did a really bad report last week and I was late I was 5 minutes late that one day because I had a flat tire, but he never understand. And suddenly we've spiraled and we've built up this entire story in our brains, and our brain doesn't recognize that that's not actually happening. So we're putting ourselves back in that stress response, and it becomes the self-perpetuating story of negativity.
Mhm.
And just I pulled up my very handy list of warning signs of stress. You've got these physical symptoms of headache, stomach ache, sleeping problems, back pain, tight neck and shoulders. As a massage therapist, I see so many people still having all these physical symptoms. Smoking, drinking too much, grinding of teeth, being critical of others is a sign of stress. If you're being bossy, if you're being a bully, that can be a sign of stress. And here's a couple of the ones that I think are really key. Is forgetfulness. Sometimes it's not just, oh, you're getting older, you're stressed, your brain is thinking about something else. Memory loss, inability to make good decisions, thoughts of running away, you lose your sense of humor, you start to not take pleasure in those things you used to take pleasure in. And it's so funny because I do a lot of radio shows as a guest, and I was talking to this radio show host, and he said, hey Kathy, can you go over some of the warning signs of stress? And I said, yeah. So I went through like 10 of them, and it's dead silent on the other end of the phone. We weren't video, so I couldn't see what had happened. And I finally said, hello? Because nothing's better on live radio than dead silence.
Balance.
And he finally says, oh no. And I had called into the show. I said, oh, did we lose our feed? Are we off the air? And he goes, no, I'm stressed. I had no idea.
Yeah.
He didn't recognize that those signs were an indication that the body's going, help, help, I'm in a stress state. He took it as, oh, well, I'm just getting older, or, oh, well, my shoulder always hurts. Our body finds this homeostasis and tells us that these things are normal. They're not normal. So if you're starting to have warning signs of stress, or you see it in your coworker, your boss, your family, your kids, it's a red flag that something's wrong and you need to take action.
Well, I think that's where the awareness has to kick in, right? I mean, and that's why we have these warning signs, because yeah, if you're constantly having headaches, if you've got back pain, neck pain, you're having trouble sleeping, right? You can't think clearly. And if this is happening, routinely, then there's something behind it that you have to release, for you to get that. I remember one story, and you probably heard and dealt with things like this, right? But somebody was coming in and oh, I have neck pain. I have neck pain. You need to massage it out, or use some chiropractic and get it out. And then, the person that was helping him said, they were talking about what's going on in their life, and this person says, "Oh, John is a pain in the neck."
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Hold it. Did you hear what you just said?" Right? And actually, that again, that pain that was in this lady's neck was as a result of some relationship that she was having stress with.
Yep.
And when you deal with the underlying, which is the relationship, right, that the pain in the neck ends up going away. And
Yep.
so I think this is, especially now in today's, medical science and everything, is take a pill, put a Band-Aid on it, is kind of the response to everything. And so, when we get a pain in the neck, you go take painkillers for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of maybe going back and taking care of whatever's causing that to begin with, which is where that awareness has to come in. Why am I feeling this way? Why have I been having headaches for the last, week? There's probably something else, that we need to get to. I mean, are there ways for people, once you finally become aware, to say, hold it, how can I try to figure out what might be going on and what's actually stressing me so I can get rid of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the pain in the neck example. I have so many clients that come in, and I even joke and I say, who's the pain in the neck? And they always laugh. They don't even have to think about it. Tends to be the spouse or the boss. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, we have these are the phrases we use. He's a pain in the neck. I've got the weight of the world on my shoulders. I can't stomach this. You're getting under my skin. My hands are full. My heart is breaking. These are the phrases we use. And I think I came up with well over 65 of those phrases in my stress book, because I realized there's this huge mind-body connection. Now, I'm not saying that we're causing our own illness. I'm not saying that everything that physically happens in our body is linked to some stressor. Don't stop going to your doctor and just sit around and ponder your stress. That would just be irresponsible. But if it's contributing even 10% or 5% to what's happening, why would you not want to address that? So I think really asking yourself those questions and getting to the root of the problem is key. And it's funny because the low back has a correspondence. I have so many low back clients in my office. Low back has to do with money issues, sex issues, and personal support issues. And I remember saying that to a guy who was having really bad low back problems. Now, he was also like a carpenter. So he's on the floor all the time. He's crawling, So it physically kind of made sense that he'd have back pain, but I brought it up because I never know what's going to hit someone when I say that. And he was quiet for the longest time. And he said, actually, I've been thinking about what you said about the sex issues, the money issues, and the personal support issues. And I said, okay. He said, I'm really worried about my business. With the economy downturn, I'm not as busy, and I'm really afraid to tell my wife because, we plan for these things. And, we had this whole conversation around this, which was kind of interesting because he was kind of like a guy's guy. He was not going to get into the touchy-feely kumbaya kind of stuff that occasionally pops up in my practice. And so we had this whole conversation around this. And I said, well, I don't know your wife. I frankly don't know you very well, but I assume you guys are your partners, right? And he said, yeah, we really well together. And I said, I would tell her
Yeah.
and ask for her support on this and really look into the reality of the situation, because sometimes we say, oh my God, I'm going to be broke, and we've got $5 million in the bank. It's that perception. So what is the reality of this before we start spiraling off? And so he said, I might do that. So he leaves the appointment. He comes back a couple weeks later. His back is better, and he just has this different air about him. And he said, I sat my wife down, and I told her about my concerns, and we actually went through our books, and we went through our retirement, and we went through our checking account. And he said, I realized if I never got any busier than I am right now, we're okay. We're
Wow.
okay. And he said, but I have a question for you. I said, okay. He said, so money issues, sex issues, personal support issues. I said, yeah. He goes, why doesn't everybody have low back pain?
Because we all have those 3 issues, right?
Yep. And I
not,
said,
not that I have any lower back.
no.
Yeah.
But I kind of laughed and I said, because not everybody stuffs it.
Yeah.
And I see it coming out in the body when we're stuffing it, when we're not addressing it, when we're not going to the boss and saying, I'm really having a problem with such and such so-and-so, and I feel this anger bubbling up, and he has an ulcer, or not letting things go, or gripping too tightly, and suddenly carpal tunnel syndrome is there. And again, not to take the physical aspect out of it, if you're typing all day, sure, but there's a lot of people typing all day who aren't coming up with these same issues. So it's just something to look at. But if you're stuffing the emotion and the stress, it's going to come out somewhere. So figure out where that is.
Well, that's why, because I've been amazed too. And like you said, I mean, a lot of times there really are, some real physical issues that you need to go to your doctor for.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been kind of amazed actually reading some of the research and other stuff that people have been doing, especially with some of the neurobiology,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that, the brain itself actually has a huge, in our kind of mental attitude about it, has a
Mm-hmm.
huge impact. I mean, they'll actually do studies where they're testing a drug, for some kind of a thing like that, and they'll actually do placebo effects,
Yeah.
or tell people, maybe that they're getting something that they're not. I mean, placebo, or have them do some mindset type of a thing. And it's amazing. I mean, often the results are the same or better, without actually taking the drug. It's just showing
Mm-hmm.
how much our brain really does impact the rest of our body.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting, too, like you said, that we have all these phrases that we say: pain in the neck, weight of the world, feel it in my gut, all those different things. And yet a lot of times that ends up being where it's there. And we've talked about fear before, right? And I think, again, a lot of the stress, like you said, it goes back to this fear of, hey, there's this demand that's coming up, I'm not going to have the resources for it, oh, woe is me, kind of a thing. Or like what you talked about, where you said stuffing, right? I love that. We're just kind of stuffing that down into ourselves instead of releasing it. And that ends up leading to, often longer term, issues with, again, headaches, not being able to sleep well, other stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to me.
Yeah, because, okay, oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay, so placebo effect. We'll come back to that in a second, because I'm such a nerd. I'm going to let my nerd out and say something about placebo effect. But the thing about the stress is, in this present moment, there is no stress.
Mm-hmm.
For you and me, there's no stress right now. For people listening, there's no stress right now. The stress is behind us and things we're remembering, regretting, dwelling on. And in the future of those what ifs, what if it's cancer? What if the boss fires me? What if I miss that meeting? What if I don't get there on time? What if my kid's on drugs? Why are we doing that to ourselves? Those what ifs are often some future time. And you know what the future is? Non-existent, because it's always the present.
Yep.
And Eckhart Tolle, who I'm a huge fan of his work, he said that there was a pub in Scotland, and on the door they said, free beer tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant because there's never tomorrow,
Well,
so
yeah.
people show up and go, it's, oh crap, it's today again, So
Well, and I wondered, did people end up hanging out in front of the door too, right? So that they maybe sleep out, so they could get free beer tomorrow. And then, the guy opens the door and he's like, "What are you guys doing here?" "Well, it's free beer tomorrow." "Yeah, it's tomorrow. Come back tomorrow." "But we've been waiting here since yesterday."
I know. Well, there's no yesterday either. It's just
Yeah.
now. And the more we can, and now we've talked about this in every episode, no matter what we talk about, we end up going back to this idea of presence because that's so important. But in presence, there is no stress. Even the traffic that we're sitting in isn't about the traffic. It's about where we should have been 10 minutes ago or where we have to be in 5 and we're not going to make it. It's not about right there. Can I nerd out on the placebo effect?
You can nerd out anytime.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So Fabrizio, oh my God, this is just, Fabrizio Benedetti is like the godfather of placebo effect. I read a couple of his books called Placebo Effect. He researches at the University of Turin in Italy, and he is a rock star to me. I would literally throw clothing on the stage if he was speaking. Yeah, right. Placebo! Yeah. He did a study, okay, because he was trying to prove placebo effect. And how do you test placebo effect when the gold standard of testing drugs is placebo effect? Becomes a conundrum. So what he did is he started doing open versus hidden treatments. So what he would do is he would have somebody in the hospital and he would walk up to them and say, "What's your pain level?" 8. "Okay, I'm going to inject some morphine into your IV." He'd wait a couple minutes. "Okay, now what's your pain level?" 2. "Great." He would inject saline. It wouldn't be any pain meds.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, he had a machine behind a curtain that would randomly give the person pain meds. They didn't report their pain went down if they didn't know the meds were being given.
Amazing.
It's so amazing. The brain is so amazing. And with the amount of opioid addiction we have right now and the amount of unmanaged pain, if we can tap into that, if we can tap into the power of our brain and how suggestible and susceptible we are to what we're being told, to what we're thinking about, to what's happening in our environment, we can solve so many problems and we can be more productive because our brain is what holds us back from that potential so often. It's that stress, it's those mismanaged thoughts, it's that dwelling in the past and the projecting into the future that keeps us stuck. This is why the presence and the mindfulness is so important, and we have to find a way to handle our stress.
Yeah. Well, because like you said, I mean, I love studies like that. I heard another one where they were looking at knee pain. And so it was the same thing where they went in and they actually did do a procedure on some people, small incision. I think they flushed out the knee with saline was one of the things they did, or some other stuff. But some people, all they did was made a small incision and did nothing to the knee, but just told them, "Okay, you've had the surgery." And it was the same thing because they thought it had happened. It was the same thing like you talked about with the placebo effect in the morphine. Their brain, just processed that, and they had just as good or better results than the people who actually had the surgical procedure. So there is a lot of power in the brain, and we just have to unlock it. Get rid of the stress, try to be in the presence because, like you said, the more that we're in the present, the less we're feeling about the stress. Which, I know I'd like less stress in my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I need to be more present.
Yep, make that choice. Let me just address the good side of stress, because I so often talk about the bad stress and how stress affects communication and decision making and leadership and what happens between teams and risk taking and all that negative stuff. Some people really thrive on stress. I don't know any of them, but some people function really well with that pressure. My life is very busy. I like it that way. I like the go, go, go. I like the multiple tabs on the computer open. I like multiple projects happening at once. I have a stress hardiness for that. Whereas my girlfriend, she's good. She teaches me to relax. Her idea of relaxing, though, is she lays in a chaise lounge. And she just lays there. I don't know who put her in timeout and when she's allowed to get up and go read or something, but she just lays there. I'm like, oh my God, are you being punished?
No, she put herself in timeout.
I know. Why would you do that? Sounds horrible. Anyway, she said when God handed out ambition, she got out of line to get ice cream and I got hers too, which I thought was hilarious. So my life runs at the speed of a Ferrari. And that's great until something happens that I didn't plan, until something happens that's unexpected. I am in that groove. I handle stuff very quickly. My brain works really fast until something is thrown up in my life, in my day, that I don't count on. Mm-hmm. So if you're one of those run on high stress people, that's great. I'm telling you right now, it's not sustainable. And I have so many women who I looked at as my sort of personal idols, specifically here in Santa Barbara. 3 of them have now died from either heart issues or cancer, and one of them actually said to me almost on her deathbed, Kathy, don't do this to yourself. And I went, oh crap, because I envied the fastness of their life. I envied the success they had, and I realized it's not good. Mm-hmm. Success is great, and we're striving for that, and we want you all to thrive and be successful and unlock that potential, but you have to look at the cost of that. And if you are running yourself ragged, and if you are not healthy, it doesn't matter how much success you have. So the back end of this potential and having this success and having this life that you dream of is being alive and healthy to enjoy it. So if you're running high on stress, that's great. That can be a good thing short term, but when you base your life on that, it's not. So maybe that wasn't the good thing about stress, except it's motivating and it can allow you to accomplish a lot, but don't burn yourself out.
Well, it is. And that's why, you just have to be careful that it's in chunks. Right. And there needs to be that time out for ourselves, whether you're on the Chase Lounge or you're doing something else, because it's just like, we were talking, I think before about running away from a bear. Right. Well, you've got to take, after you do that, you've got to stop for a minute. Right. So, even in football, right. There's a break between each of the game plays because you can't, kind of exert that kind of physical intensity 100% of the time. Right. And so there always has to be that time where we stop and we do the pause and then we go back to it again. And so, everybody's life is full. We fill it with different things, but we all have 24 hours a day. Right. And, how we choose to fill it and what we choose to think about are some of the things that we do get to choose. And, the more crazy your life is, the busier you are. We all just have to be prepared for when those things happen and have some tools or techniques to try to get us through and realize, because like you said, all the success and money in the world, doesn't really do you any good if you aren't healthy, if you don't have energy, if you don't have the connections and the relationships with people, because those are the things that really make life enjoyable. And like you said, with these women that you knew on one's deathbed, nobody ever says, I wish I would have worked more. Right. And even though, again, we want the success, we have to realize success is not necessarily money. It is money to help us be able to do some things, but so much of life and what real or true success is has a lot more to do with the connections and the way that we're helping people and making this place a better world to live. So.
And having balance in that. All right, we should let everybody go and de-stress. Let me give my first technique. Now we've talked about the horrors of stress. We've got everyone like, oh my God. Here's my first technique. Close your eyes and take a breath. And now open your eyes. Simple. If you're listening to this driving, don't close your eyes. But the second part of this breath is really watching that breath. It's watching it like you're watching somebody else breathe. It's observing that inhale, and then at the top of that inhale, there's that teeny little break before the inhale and the exhale. There's that space between, and then the exhale starts and then stops, and there's that little break sort of at the bottom of the breath. So go ahead and do that breath again, but really watch the breath. So let's watch for those pauses. So take that breath again. Mm-hmm. That's the first technique. Because whether you're doing yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, martial arts, meditation, it all starts with the breath, which not only brings us back to this present moment, it signals to our brain that we can stop the fight or flight because we're okay. So that's your first technique. And over the course of these podcasts, over the next 5 million years, we will be building on these techniques. But that's the most basic one. That's the first one. So any final thoughts, Jason, before we leave everyone to just breathe?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's because we need to get everybody out of here so that they can go and de-stress. But I think it's interesting because that technique that you just talked about as well, actually used in trainings and actually in business meetings as well, just to try to get people present before an important meeting, as an example, because everybody walks into the room with all of their stuff from before, right? And even just pausing for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and just have everybody take a couple of deep breaths allows yourself to kind of become present. And again, like we said, the more present we are, the less stress we're going to feel, because stress is either rumination from the past or of future things that we're afraid of. So the more you are present, the less stress you're going to have in your life, which I don't know anybody who would say I want more stress in my life. So I think this is, thanks for sharing that tip. And let's get people to start de-stressing in their life.
Absolutely. Perfect. Beautiful. Everyone go breathe. I am Kathy Gruber, and I'm
And I'm Jason Mefford, and can be reached at jasonmefford.com. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your time, and we'll see you on a future episode of the Fire and Earth podcast.